A fragrance for those who appreciate the classics, the brand new 2024 Acqua di Gio Eau de Parfum.
Here's some codes to save you some cash on your next Middle Eastern niche or designer fragrances.
What's going on, guys? My name is Neeb. Welcome back to AROMATIX. Today is not going to just be a fragrance for those who enjoy classics, but an entire video, because we're going to be talking about the best ones in my collection and why I picked up certain ones and why I didn't. So before we get started, make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button. Let's go ahead and kick things off with a ranking system. We're going to be organizing this in a numbered fashion, starting off with the best one to the least one. I've had quite a few of these bottles that I either ran through, gave away, or just finished and didn't find the need to buy again, or not buy from the beginning. So let's go ahead and address first off the classic Acqua di Gio Eau de Toilette. So in a sense, it was the #1 fragrance that started this whole DNA, obviously, but it actually was kind of a market shaker, basically. You had this fragrance that was rather than just your typical barbershop-y fougere, in the era of fougères, do this marine, woody, aquatic style DNA. It kind of enhanced the overall masculine genre of fragrances, and it's one that I grew up loving, genuinely. So I grew up in that Acqua di Gio era, and I used to rock the hell out of it. It used to give performance once upon a time, and over time it has definitely changed in the performance department. It used to be a fragrance that lasted all day, and we could sit here all day and talk about why it changed in terms of the performance. Is it because there were harmful ingredients? Who knows, okay? Regardless of the facts, it started a DNA that stemmed way too many flankers, in my opinion. I mean, it's honestly so hard to keep track with, and so I think that this video is going to be, it's very necessary. This is a scent profile that's for someone who's not trying to show stop or get like the most compliments in the world, but a daily 9-to-5 style DNA. Somebody who's wearing a shirt and a hat. This is the perfect style outfit for something like this. Not necessarily the most compliment-worthy fragrance either, but it's very classic, it works, and timeless. Inoffensive and potentially compliment getter, but nothing of like, you know, compliment galore. So although Eau de Toilette started it all, it is absolutely not #1, and I don't think it's worth purchasing at all nowadays. There are still people who walk into the mall, fall in love with the scent profile, and if it works for you, it works for you, awesome, but it's not going to be placed at #1. I just wanted to start off with that to give you a little bit of history behind that scent profile. Not necessarily the note breakdown, but for the most part, it's going to be aquatic, aromatic, and woody. That's it, as simple as that. A little bit of that by the beach style DNA, aquatic, and then you also get some fresh herbs and a woody dry down that wears light. You can wear it all year round. It's not going to do the best during the winter, but if you're an office goer, like I said, it's perfect for exactly that. So starting things off with the #1 fragrance on this list, which unfortunately is discontinued. I'm sorry to do this to you guys, but it has to be mentioned because it was another pivotal fragrance in their whole flanker lineup. It's the Profumo. Now discontinued. I got this big ass bottle, and I'll have to be honest, I mean, I didn't really go through it because of the fact that although it is the best one, it isn't necessarily something that I really find the need or taste for going for. And I'll tell you exactly why for me personally. It actually takes that basic office scent and adds much more of like the sexy factor and interesting factor. And that's why this one took off, man. It was incense, patchouli, olibanum, along with that marine, woody, aromatic. So it's a fragrance that offered you multiple accords and slightly took us out of the realm of just flat basic designer, and it saw a lot of success, which is phenomenal. For an office goer, this is the perfect scent. This is like somebody who's wearing a button-up Oxford, going on a date, who doesn't want to really you know, off-put anybody, but wants to smell nice and masculine. Mature office goer vibes all day, and a little bit more upscaled than that as well. You can wear this to the office, leave, wear it to a date, leave, go home, and cuddle up while still wearing this. So it was the perfect Acqua di Gio flanker, genuinely. I would assume whatever ingredient is responsible for that earthy patchouli and smoke combination got regulated for one reason or another for safety concerns, and they had to basically discontinue it. And the reason I say that is because they tried to re-release it in a more milder form that removed that incense, and it's going to be the Acqua di Gio Parfum. Before we jump into this one and where it places, the performance for this was literally all day to the next day, genuinely. I mean, this was not like a beast mode in terms of projection, but it lasted to the next day easily on clothing, and what you were left with was this slightly aquatic, more so incense, patchouli, olibanum style of DNA. So clean, masculine, slightly oriental from that dry down of the olibanum and that incense, and basically a 10 out of 10 in terms of what this fragrance does. It's phenomenal. Not necessarily my 10 out of 10 or favorite 10 of all time, but in terms of the Acqua di Gio lineups, easily the best one. Now the next one that was released, or the next one that's going to be placed on the second place, is going to be, even to my surprise, the Acqua di Gio Parfum. When I got my hands on the newest flanker, I kind of determined that I wanted to make this video rather than just talking about this one alone, and I started to revisit a lot of these other flankers. Parfum was one of those that I kind of signed off because there was just so much negativity about this flanker because of how many people were salty about the fact that they discontinued the Profumo, that a lot of people just didn't want to hear about how good or how bad it was. They just wanted to hear, no, it's bad, they did something bad, forget about it. But genuinely, you guys, this is actually really good. Sure, it's not as camphorous, it's not as incensey, but I kid you not, I sprayed this on, went to bed, woke up, and it was still there on skin. So when I initially got this fragrance, I wasn't wasn't really getting more than about 8 to 9 hours. On clothing, potentially even 10 hours. But now, for whatever it's worth, I literally just tested it last week on 2 occasions, and it's been lasting more than 8 hours. I've sprayed this on, very generously of 8 to 12 sprays, and I've had absolutely no problem. And this isn't a scent profile that's offensive. It's not something that I was worried about when spraying that much either, and it did just fine. I didn't necessarily go around about town and try and get compliments. So for whatever it's worth, we're gonna keep that out of the ranking. And in terms of comparison to the other scent profiles, when tested across the boards for all of them, and literally smelling and being able to compare which ones I get more accords from, which one's more interesting, which one do I lean in for more sniffs, this is definitely going to be number 2. And this is exactly why I wanted to make sure that before I pump out a full review that I tested them all. There are just too many flankers, and with this line specifically, there's just too many flankers with this DNA, and there's a huge following. So to not really steer you guys wrong and to give you guys more of an in-depth, that's why I started revisiting all of these. So at number 2 spot is the Parfum. The performance, honestly, you guys, this is giving me what I expected and exceeding my expectations at this point, to be real with you guys. Coming up at number 3rd spot. Now this one is relatively new, and it was actually pretty hard to determine. And in fact, this is one that didn't necessarily get the 3rd spot initially, but more so as it started to dry down, and very specifically. So these are really close, genuinely, and you might want to pay close attention to this one. So number 3 is going to be the newest one, and this is called Acqua di Gio Eau de Parfum. And as you can tell, this is not the all clear version, which is, wait a minute, isn't that what it's supposed to be? Yeah, they just came out with a new one in 2024 that's now available on Nordstrom that I didn't even know was out, that I ended up picking up and finding out that the difference, the actual note breakdown, was only 1 note. They removed the mineral notes in the Eau de Parfum clear bottle. That is the 1 note that kept me away from this DNA. I have no problem with mineral notes, but when they start to go metallic, it can actually give me a headache personally. So if you're like me, you don't really like that metallic vibe to a lot of fragrances. And although a lot of notes are responsible for metallic notes, not all are created or used equally. Sometimes it could be, a molecule that utilizes the same scent, but does it differently, has less metallic, etc. Anyways, this one does not have anything metallic, and in fact, it smells like a more naturalistic take on that similar scent profile. So from the top to the dry down, what you get is pretty much what you're gonna get through the entirety. You get that classic Acqua di Gio meets Profumo. That's what I get with this fragrance. Less smoky, obviously, but what you end up with is something fresh, aquatic, aromatic. You have a pretty similar aromatic mid of this fragrance, which is generally speaking going to be relatively consistent across the boards, except with this one more specifically being like geranium, I think it's lavender and clary sage. And then you get that consistent tea-like accord with that fresh aquatic woods in the dry downs. So more so of a naturalistic take, not necessarily going to be a natural smelling fragrance, and not really anything groundbreaking either. But if you like the original style DNA, this is probably one of the most reminiscent to me to the original meets the Profumo. You've got this fresh aquatic citruses at the top. Definitely it does open up pretty bright and citrusy, that dries down more aromatic and woody, along with having that earthy dry down of the patchouli and vetiver. So the citruses do fall off on this one, kind of reminiscent to the Acqua di Gio Profumo and Parfum, except in the beginning it really reminds me of the original. And that's pretty much it. In terms of the performance, it gives me a solid 8 hours. I will say that the projection of this one isn't really going to be the best thing in the world, but it does last. This is the perfect, inoffensive office goer scent, basically. It doesn't have anything that's like extremely protruding in terms of very fresh, very metallic, but it does something very subtle, confident, and kind of a blend of all worlds. In terms of how close it actually is to the Parfum and the original, I will say that there is a lot more of a stemming resemblance to the Parfum. The only difference being that this one kind of smells more appropriate for like a nighttime scent, although you can rock this literally all day. Whether or not these can be redundant, I personally don't believe so. Where this one goes more towards that Oriental Olibanum, and having that Oriental edge, this keeps things pretty westernized and just straight up more so about the aromatics and that freshness at the top, basically. So fresher, more aromatic, whereas this one goes more Oriental aromatic and woody, basically. So if you're looking for something slightly more Western and less of that whole resin vibe, you're gonna be happy with this one. Now, I will say that the reason why it was kind of challenging to place at this point is because there isn't really anything that's like groundbreaking about it. I've smelled it before, like I said, with the Acqua di Gio Eau de Toilette, and then with the Parfum and something like I said, in between both of those, basically. So not the most groundbreaking release. However, it is a really good scent profile for those who specifically appreciate the original. Now, I can see a case with people not enjoying this one, and who's that going to be? People who are bored of the original DNA. If you're bored of the original DNA, don't even bother with this one because you're probably not going to enjoy it. It's nothing groundbreaking. And that's pretty much that. 8 hours every single day. You could rock this literally in any season. This is like versatility to the max. Winter, fall, spring, summer. And that's what makes this one so reminiscent to the original, because that's what I wore it to. When it still had performance, it still did fine in the winter. But after they reformulated, and unfortunately that's mostly what people know it for, is the reformulated batches, it was pretty watered down. Although this one does also work all year round, I would say it works even better during the fall and the winter time than something like this. In terms of all year, this is one of the best ones. In terms of like fall, even spring and winter, this will still work. And even during the summertime, it'll still work. Moving on to number 4. This is the one that I was having a hard time, contending against the Acqua di Gio Eau de Parfum. And this is solid. Honestly, the opening of this is, in my opinion, better than the Eau de Parfum, but it's the dry down that really loses it for me personally. This Acqua di Gio Profondo, the best one out of the Profondo series. Profondo Lights, Profondo Eau de Parfum, Profondo Parfum. They came out with so many flankers, but nothing beats the Profondo. This is beautifully aromatic, fresh, extremely marine, citrusy, and then it dries down to something woody, but also mineralic, and that's where it loses me. Now, the opening of this, you would assume that C and C notes, it's gonna be salty, but it surprisingly doesn't really do too much of that. What makes this one magical as well and keeping it fresh is the aromatic rosemary in that mid. It gives you like this minty vibe. Rosemary relating to the family of mint. You're gonna feel like it's literally cooling you off, refreshing, almost like brisk air at the seaside, basically. There's a pretty hefty saltiness to the fragrance, but all those aromatics and everything else kind of keep your mind busy and not really focus on all of that until it starts to dry down. I will say that this is actually a pretty long-lasting fragrance, and in terms of that first 2 hours, has a lot more interesting points and factors than the 2024 Eau de Parfum. But I will say that as you get to hour 3, some of those salty notes are still lingering on. The rosemary might still be there, prominent, and the woods and mineral notes starts to shine. Once that mineral note starts to come in, I think it really enhances more of those salty accords and starts to go a bit like seaweed, almost literally like seaweed. And that should be no surprise because there are sea notes. I don't have a problem with marine vibe fragrances or sea-like fragrances as long as they don't go too much into that wet algae style of fragrance, basically. But the mineral notes, along with some of those woods at the base and maybe some of those aromatics and the sea notes, creates this wet, aromatic, almost seaweed-like accord. And that's where it starts to lose me. I mean, the first 2 hours is like, damn, this is better than the Eau de Parfum 2024. And it seems like you have a lot more accords. You're getting fresh, you're getting salty, you're getting aromatic. The rosemary is magical in this one. I love fragrances with rosemary. Just to give you guys an example of that cooling effect in what fragrance you'll find it, that very single accord or effect, I'm using this for a reference, is gonna be like Eros Flame. If you guys are familiar with that cooling vibe, you're gonna get something similar like that, but everything else obviously being different. So beautiful fragrance, very citrusy, very lively, except because of the fact that it has that seaweed vibe, I probably reserve this very strictly to when I'm at the beach, basically, because that seaweed vibe will probably just get muzzled out by everything else around. But even then, the opening, magical. I still think it's top 5. Just in that dry down, if I really start to pay attention to it, I start to get a little bit turned off by this. Still smells great, still lasts literally all day, 8 to 10 hours of this fragrance as well, but I like a more naturalistic smelling style of scent profile. I feel like for the masses, at least for those who spray it on initially and sniff it and then say, oh, yes or no, you're probably gonna like the Profondo more. But for those of you who are interested in the entire wear and the way that the scent profile lives throughout the entirety of the fragrance, although this lacking complexity in terms of its development, and this one definitely having a more interesting development, the development in itself isn't really something that I enjoyed in the dry down. So that's it. That's basically what I think. Profondo and Eau de Parfum are very close neck and neck. I would say that the opening of the Profondo is more interesting, but overall, a total fragrance, this wins. It wins in versatility. You can wear it all year round, where this is reserved to just like summer, maybe springtime. It also wins in the total scent experience, basically. Still a great fragrance. I would just say that this is probably like an 8.5, where I would place this like an 8.75 out of 10, basically. This one being a 9 out of 10, and this one being a 10 out of 10. Moving on to the next one, this is Acqua di Gio Absolute. I don't really have too much to say about this one. It's also discontinued, and it did do something a little bit sour on my skin. On clothing, it's absolutely magical. So this takes this scent profile, adds more fruits, basically. There's pear, it gummies it up, essentially. It's very addicting and enjoying at the top, but once it starts to dry down, it's like this marine, woody, aromatic. It's kind of doing a bit too much, basically. The ambers and the salty accords and the fruits are coming off like sweet gummy, but also salty at the same time. So I don't really like the way that it reacts on skin, but on clothing, it's actually pretty good. So I don't regret buying it for reference's sake, but I'm probably not really gonna be leaning for this one that often. I would imagine that if it did not do that on my skin, it actually smells really good. And I'll be honest that this still smells amazing. Like, I'll probably spray it on clothing if I'm ever inclined to rock it. And I wish it worked a little bit better for me, but it just doesn't. I will say that if it doesn't do that on your skin, then this is actually one of the best smelling scent profiles. So they also released an Absolute Instinct, which is a little bit unusual for me as well. But I have to be honest, I didn't get to live with it too much. There were just too many flankers for me to actually find interest. It gets so confusing. If you're not already confused with these, imagine like having 20 more basically. But these, for the most part, are the ones that I actually, decided to dive into head first. Another one that I did as well was the Acqua di Gio Profondo Eau de Parfum. I'm glad I got this in the small one because this literally smells like a more resinous version of this basically. So the dry down of this was a little bit, ambery, warmer. At this point, it was just like, all right, man, it's enough. It's getting boring now. Like Profondo Lights, Profondo Eau de Parfum, and it's kind of strange, I don't know. But the Profondo Lights didn't work for me either. Profondo Parfum was not something I was interested in grabbing either. I am, however, now committed to buying most of the new releases, including any of the potentially boring or potentially hidden gems that come out in the near future. And if you want to stay up to date in terms of which ones are coming out and what I think and how they stack up against some of these, make sure to leave a like and hit that subscribe button. To address the elephant in the room, how does it compare to the Eau de Parfum All Clear? Initially, when I got my nose on the All Clear Eau de Parfum version, I wasn't really in love. I did remember a lot of that original scent profile of the Acqua di Gio, but something a little bit more aromatic basically, and a little bit dry and woody in the dry down. The only thing with that fragrance is, although it seemingly was a little bit fresher than this one, in the dry down it had that mineral note, which kind of threw me off. The mineral note in combination with the salty accords comes off a little bit metallic and salty on my skin. I tried to live a little bit more with that fragrance through a decant, and I decided ultimately that I didn't want to buy a full bottle because of the fact. In terms of longevity and stuff, it wasn't too far off from this one, but I do feel like this one lingered on a little bit longer. So in terms of this one, when I went to the store, I initially sprayed it on. I got a relatively close style scent profile. It wasn't really too off, seemingly a little bit more aromatic and less fresh than the Eau de Parfum, the clear one. I did definitely saw a relationship between this and that original one, but I also saw a couple of differences, being that the aromatics in this one, specifically the clary sage and geranium, seemingly a little bit more enhanced. Now we're talking about small ass differences, you guys. If you have the clear one, this will absolutely be different. I'm not telling you that this is a must-have or that if you have the original clear one that you need to go grab this. I'm actually saying that don't do that. Make sure that anything I'm saying aligns with your taste or doesn't align with your taste, and make your own judgment. The only difference being that this dries down more aromatic and woody and no mineral note, no metallic vibe to me. And that's what sealed the deal and broke the deal for the other fragrance. So that's why I grabbed this. And in that respect, I definitely think this is an improvement from the All Clear that I believe was released in 2022. So whether or not you should buy it is completely up to you. I don't think that this is absolutely must-have worthy, but to me, this is like the middle ground of the Acqua di Gio Classic meets one of the other best flankers. I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Make sure to leave a like, hit that subscribe button. Till the next one. Peace.